Hello, this video is going to demonstrate how to run an independent sample t-test. As you remember, the independent sample t-test, that was my dog coughing. The independent sample t-test is where you test for difference. And with this one, we're testing for difference between two groups. So you can test on a survey, you can look at men and women, or you could look at two different races, or you could look at two different majors. So there are a lot of different things you can look at, and you can look at two different groups to see if there's a difference between those groups. So the groups are typically going to be nominal level data, categorical data, and the variable that you're testing to see if there's a difference needs to be either interval or ratio level data. So luckily on the survey we did, we have a lot of interval and several ratio level questions too. I'm again going to use the downloading music data set. And so to run this, I'm going to look for something where I think there's going to be a difference between men and women. So to run this, I first go to Analyze, Compare Means, and then down to Independent Sample t-test. And again, we are doing a test of difference to see if there's a difference in two groups on one question. So do they feel differently, these members of these two different groups? So what I've done, I should probably talk through this. I've gone to Analyze, Compare Means, and then Independent Sample t-test. And it's called that because we are going to look at two different groups as if they were two independent samples. And so the test variable, as I said, for this needs to be interval or ratio. And I'm going to pick Ethics 8 and see if there's a difference between men and women on that question. And the statement is, downloading music from illegal sources when the music is not available in stores is not stealing. So I'm asking the research question, do men and women feel differently about this question? So I'm testing for differences. And in this case, I'm looking at the interval level question, Ethics 8, downloading music from illegal sources when the music is not available in stores is not stealing. So I'm highlighting Ethics 8, moving the test variable over. I'm going to go down to find sex or gender on here to look for two different groups. And here it's sex 46. I select that, and to find the groups, with this one, of course, we have two groups, men and women. And I put in group 1 is 1, group 2 is 2, because again, on our survey, that's how they are listed. But if I wanted to do, let's say, two different races, I would just pick the numbers that correspond to those different groups. I'm going to click Continue, and then OK, and it will run. So there you have the independent sample test table and the group statistics table. I'm simply going to highlight this information at the top and delete it to move this up, so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm also going to move this line over and let this print out and the important information take a more important spot. Okay, honey? All right, so no more eating popcorn while we're doing this. Okay, so we are looking at Ethics 8 and two groups, men and women, to see if there's a statistically significant difference. Now, with this one, in order to tell if there is a difference, we come down to the two-tailed sig. And in the two-tailed sig, this is where we see if there is a difference between the groups. And with this, you see we've got, in the independent sample t-test, you see we have two different two-tailed sigs. And so, as you know, what we determine, our criteria determine whether it's statistically significant at the 95% confidence level, is if it is equal to or less than 0.05. And these are different, but they are both greater than 0.05. So we would say, although it's very, very close, we do not have a statistically significant difference in either of these situations. So we would say we do not. And then that means if we look up here and we look at the mean for both groups, we would say although these are different numbers, that it is not statistically different, that those are approximately the same, and any difference we see in these two means is due to sampling error and is not due to a true difference between the groups. If one of these was statistically significant, we would come over and look at the Levene's test for equality of variances, and that would determine whether we use the top or the bottom two-tailed sig. If it's 0.05 or less, we would use the bottom. If it's greater than 0.05, as this one is, we would use this top number to determine which two-tailed sigs we use. And so if we were to even look at that, it's greater than 0.05, so we would use the top number, but 0.057 is certainly greater than 0.05, although just barely, but we would say we do not have a statistically significant difference between these two groups at the 95% confidence level. So let me quickly look through G, H, I, and J and just talk you through that. Where it says state the null hypothesis for each hypothesis for the variables you selected. The first one, our test question really, the null for that would say that there is not a statistically significant difference between men and women and whether they feel that downloading music from illegal sources when the music is not available in stores is not stealing. And that's the null, that there is not a difference with how men and women feel about that research question. H says state exactly where you look to determine statistical significance and include the specific numbers. I would say I looked at the two-tailed sig. Because these are different, I would say I looked at these and then decided whether I'd use the top or the bottom because they are different. And so then, because they are different, I come over to Levene's test for quality of variance. It is 0.060. We know the criteria is 0.05. Since this is greater, this is where I looked. So it would be 0.057 is where I looked to determine whether this was statistically significant or not. And also the Levene's test for quality of variance. And since it is greater, I say that I have equal variances and that I used the 0.057. I says explain whether you accepted the null or failed to accept the null. In this case, I accepted the null because they are greater than 0.05. And J says articulate what this means. That is, state what you have determined in conducting this analysis, including using the wording of the survey questions in your articulation. And so I would say there is not a statistically significant difference between men and women on the statement, their agreement with the statement downloading music from illegal online sources when the music is not available in stores is not stealing. They feel approximately the same. You see, we have very different sample sizes for men and women. We also have a different standard deviation and standard error of the mean. And when SPSS takes all of this into consideration, it says then that this is not a statistically different difference in the means and that men and women feel approximately the same on this particular question. Thank you so much.